Now, in Kenya, no new railway has been built for the past 100 years until now. Behind me is the new standard gauge railway, which upon completion will connect Kenya, Uganda, South Sudan and Rwanda. It is Kenya's biggest infrastructural project since independence. But even more impressive is the way it is being done. Now, Chinese technology is combining with Kenyan skills to create one of the best examples of technological transfers on the continent. I'm Beatrice Marshall. Welcome to this special edition of Talk Africa. Now, the construction of the standard gauge railway by the China Road and Bridge Corporation was started in January of 2015. It is set to be complete by December of 2017. Now, 30,000 jobs have been created by this project, and with it, the transfer of skills and technology from Chinese minds to Kenyan hands. And with me now is the Deputy Project Manager of Section 2 of the Standard Gauge Railway, Mr. Chan. He's joining me with more. Mr. Chan, thank you very much for your time here. Now, 30,000 jobs have been created by this project. Why is this a good example of technology transfer?
我们对于这个人才培养，我们在这儿基本上分两步走。
We have put a lot of emphasis on the training of the local Kenyan talent, so that once the project has been completed, they can handle similar tasks like this one on their own. There are two major steps that we take to train the employees. This is in both the theoretical and practical approaches of building a railway. We use real-life demonstrations on site to show our employees how the process is carried out. In addition to this, our technology labs, the local employees have become completely capable of handling all the procedures of the experiments for the project and all the tests that are required. After training for 1 year on the site, our Kenyan employees are then able to take on all the many and various roles in the construction of the project. So now our Kenyan employees are fully capable of working on this railway. And in the future, they can also use the skills for any other projects that are built in Kenya as well.
What will be the benefit to Kenya?
You see, when our Kenyan employees first started working with us, most of them had very little previous knowledge about building a railway. Now, it's only been a year and they have already learned the skills and technologies needed from our training and demonstration programs. These new skills can be further applied during the later stages of our projects or even other railway projects in Kenya in the future. I think it will really help a lot to spur the development of Kenya's own railway construction capacity to greater heights.
What is the cooperation like between the Kenyan staff and the Chinese staff?
Our Chinese and Kenyan employees seem to really get along quite well together. Our entire workforce is divided into different teams that are composed of both Chinese and Kenyan staff working together. These teams have different tasks and jobs to do, but together they have helped accelerate the process of the project and move it forward. Also, our Chinese staff have learned basic Swahili to help them communicate with their Kenyan colleagues and are learning more. Our Kenyan staff have learned some basic Chinese to help them communicate as well. This has really helped the project because their communication is effective and smooth. We have seen a very good cross-cultural friendship growing between them. Like, for example, during holidays and celebrations, they all send greeting messages to each other, and they've also started to introduce their own culture to each other during their lunch breaks and off times.
所，还有一个就是在那个午休时间，他们坐下来可以聊聊异国的风情，还有一些故事。
Mr. Chan, thank you. Now, while this project may be impressive, it will amount to nothing if the local staff do not have the skills and the technology to maintain this operation once it is complete. And that is why, as part of its commitment, the China Road and Bridge Corporation launched a technology transfer training lab in Voi with the express objective of transferring skills to local engineers and technicians.
I'm going to measure 0.5 grams of cement.
Lab technician Isabella Kayemba takes us through a cement quality test. The idea is to determine the quality of cement before it's used for construction of the standard gauge railway. China Road and Bridge Construction carries out all its product quality tests here at Section 2 in Voi at the central lab. Apart from cement soil, steel and even ballast are tested here.
Tests that we always do here, I've never seen any of them failing.
An indication of the specifications required to build the railway line.
The first railway used the China standard in the abroad, and the material that's used in the structure that we make sure that it's qualified. If the strength is not enough, the structure when the railway, when the train across the bridge may be collapsed.
In addition to the vital tests done here, the CRBC Technology Transfer Centre aims to provide training for unskilled workers and pass on new skills to those already engaged in the work on this standard gauge railway project.
It is really a benefit to us because you see, like when we come from school, from campus, we don't have the experience. So through that training, we were built up, and now we think we can do what is required for us to do as lab technicians.
The training centre established at Section 2 is a pilot programme for the SGR project, and more centres are expected to be launched in other campsites under the project. Matthew Edwards, CCTV.
Now, this is Jacob Mutua. He works in the lab here in Voi. He's a laboratory technician. Jacob, what have you learned here so far?
In this laboratory, I have learned about cement, I have learned about soil and aggregate and steel and concrete. We have different rooms, as you have seen. We have this is the cement laboratory we are in. Next to here we have geotechnical, which deals with soil, and we have aggregate or ballast laboratory, which I'm in charge of. Then we have concrete lab and we have steel lab. So this training has been of much help to us, since from class we have the theoretical knowledge, and when we get to this place we get the practical knowledge of the railway, which is new in Kenya.
Okay, so you mentioned that you're in charge of one of the labs here. What is the cooperation like between the Kenyan staff and the Chinese staff here?
Well, the Kenyan staff and the Chinese staff, we have got the privilege of learning from different cultures, especially when we know that we work with guys from different areas of the country, and also we work with Chinese staff. We have Chinese staff in the laboratory. We learn their culture, and we also know that it's a bit different the way we do work here and the way China does work. So we get to catch up with their speed, so that when in future we have got maybe another project in the country or anywhere else in the continent, we can learn as well to work with their speed. So it's good for us to interact with them.
All right, Jacob, thank you very much. Well, we're going to take a short break here on the program, and when we return, my expert guest will help unpack technology transfer on the continent and its benefits for both China and Africa. To stay with us.
A Chinese saying goes, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. That's exactly what the project is doing here. With these techniques and skilled people, Kenya Railways as well as African railways will be faster and stronger.
Now, barely 1 year since breaking ground on the standard gauge railway, the China Road and Bridge Corporation has become Kenya's biggest employer outside of government, employing 30,000 workers working across 9 sections just like this one. And they are also being equipped with other skills that were previously unavailable to them. Well, I sat down with expert guests to get a clearer picture of technology transfer on the continent and its benefits to China and Africa. Well, to help broaden this discussion, I have expert guests standing by. In Nairobi, Professor Michael Chege, he's an advisor at the Kenyan Ministry of Planning and National Development. In Beijing, Professor Tang Xiaoyang, he's an associate professor at the Department of International Relations at the Tsinghua University. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining in the conversation. Professor Chege in Nairobi, let me start off with you. And my starting point of this discussion is Kenya's standard gauge railway, which is being built by the China Road and Bridge Corporation. It employs about 25,000 local people and 2,000 Chinese employees. It is Kenya's first railway now in about 120 years. Now, in terms of technology transfer, what are we seeing in terms of knowledge transfer, in terms of building local capacity for the future?
I think it's like night and day. The old Kenya Railway was completed in 1899. From Mombasa to Nairobi. It proceeded in the next 3 or 4 years thereafter to Kisumu. It was a narrow gauge railway. It has fallen into disuse over the years and disrepair. And what Kenya really wanted was modern technology in railway carriage, particularly for the haulage of goods from Mombasa to Nairobi. And that is how the Chinese government and the China Roads and Bridges came into the operation of the agreement to put up new technology in the standard gauge railway.
Well, it's new technology in the standard gauge railway, and that's why it brings me to this question of the last railway was built over 100 years ago. In terms of now this new technology that Kenya is acquiring from China, what is the local capacity?
Well, the local capacity for absorbing the new technology is very much there. What Kenya lacked was capital and a good partner like China to build this road. Kenya has got enough engineers, has got enough technical people, has got a lot of well-trained and skilled people here. So it's complementary. China is bringing in credit that will enable this project to go on. Kenya is providing the labor force and also some technological skills, and China is complementing those. So I think it's a good combination of skills.
All right, so good complementation there of skills. Professor Tang, though, is technology transfer and knowledge transfer from China now, is that a new trend from Chinese investments to Africa?
Yeah, I think the technology transfer, it happens hand in hand with the increasing investment. So actually the Chinese government has been promoting technology transfer already for decades long, because every year over 10,000 African students and professionals and officials are trained by the Chinese aid programs. However, I think the technology transfer accompanied by the investments, they are different, because only when in the market situation and when the Africans, they can apply their technology real in the economic development and in building their competitiveness, then this technology can really find its use in Africa.
It can find its use in Africa, though, but what have been the challenges, though, to this point?
Yeah, so the most important challenge at this point is Africa's general industrial environment and also investment environment are still deficient to some extent. Therefore, then there are not enough factories which to build, and also there are not enough vocational training programs to give the African professionals opportunities to practice, to innovate, and to develop their own capacity.
All right. Professor Chegeto, yes, you did talk earlier about Kenya, for instance, having the expertise. But Professor Tang is saying that there is not enough industries or, manufacturing segments there for Africans particularly to practice their trade. Do you agree with that?
I think it is true that manufacturing as a component of economic growth and development in Africa is low, that new technology generally compared to the developing countries is low, and that the capacity to innovate and compete globally is low. Having said that, one must understand that Africa has 54 countries. A country like Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, those are countries that are already, if you like, not deficient in technical innovation and capacity. In fact, Nigeria and Kenya are net exporters of engineers in the developed country who have left these countries to go and look for work abroad. But as the professor has said, we also need more people, particularly at tertiary level, more technical institutions. We need more training for people that will support engineers who come in here. And we, at the same time, need to upgrade our skills in agriculture, first and foremost, which is always the most difficult place to have innovation, and also the most important part of most African economies, in manufacturing generally, but also in the service sector. If you look at the service sector and look at technical innovation in Kenya in information communications technology,
right,
like the use of mobile money on the mobile phone, you'll see the evidence of real innovation. But as I said, you have to be very specific about which country you're talking about and about what kind of technology.
All right. Professor Tang, though, in terms of, Africa needing more expertise and that sort of thing, and in terms of China's policy of knowledge transfer and building local capacity, what direction, though, is that policy taking? Because China and Africa cooperation and the technology transfer has been a priority for that since 2012. What direction is the policy taking?
Mm-hmm. I think the policy is encouraging pragmatic cooperation between China and Africa. So that's what also now the Chinese government says South-South cooperation. Because China, from its own development experience, it has found that technological evolution is critical to a country's development. But it also has found that in order to acquire technology, you need practice in the business, and also to work both public and private sectors, and also to engage with other countries, to learn from other countries. So this experience from China's own development, they are important now in the South-South cooperation, because China knows that technology in one country, it may not work in another country. Therefore, the Africans, they should also then adapt, they should learn, but they also need to adapt and then innovate their own technology in Africa. But through this more pragmatic investment, through trade, and through all the business cooperation to develop their own economy.
Right. Professor Chegeto, in terms of negotiations by African governments and African countries with China, are we seeing that component of knowledge transfer being a deliberate part now of negotiations?
First of all, let me say that on the whole, China tends to package its development assistance to African countries to suit those countries. And therefore, it is not the same in Kenya as it is in Angola or Gabon, in the same way it is in Mozambique or Botswana. So I think that is a good start. What China has done in the last 30 years is absolutely phenomenal. And there's something in it that we as African countries can learn in how. I would like to say that to your last question about whether Chinese foreign direct investment comes with technology, it's always done that. I think a lot depends on the countries which are on the receiving end to insist that an inbuilt component of technology transfer is included. Right now, the UNDP and the UN have been very strongly encouraging between us and China this idea of South-South trade. And there was a conference here in Nairobi just 3 years ago to deal with these issues. So I think that we have made a good beginning, and I believe we can do even better than we have done in the past. We have said that there are Chinese universities and colleges that are training Africans in different kinds of skills. But there's also on-the-job training. We mentioned the standard gauge railway and the people who are involved in building it, who learn on the spot and who learn through practice. There are different ways of packaging these. And perhaps we should be discussing more and more about how to package for each country a technology transfer program that suits it.
All right. I want to bring in a small criticism here, Professor Tang. And there's often criticism about Chinese labor in Africa, and there's always the question that Chinese enterprises often tend to rely more on Chinese labor than the labor of the local countries. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions about China-Africa relations during recent years. So actually the Chinese labor, they are always only a minor part in the whole staff in Chinese enterprises. The African also always made the bigger part. That's, we can also see from the Nairobi-Mombasa railway. So there are over 10,000 African workers are employed, but only about 2,000 Chinese are brought to Africa. So it's like a 2 to 10. So that's also the case for other enterprises. That's first because of labor regulation in African countries. Because the African, they have quite a strict visa permit policy for the foreigners, including Chinese. Second, also the Chinese business, they, from the economic calculation, they have to use the local workers. Otherwise, the Chinese laborers, they are expensive, and they also have a lot of extra costs like flight and accommodation. And, but however, we see the reason to say that a lot of Chinese are coming. It's because the Chinese investments are growing very rapidly.
All right. Professor Chege, from your perspective, though, and your observation, is that a valid criticism at this point?
I think anybody who says that the Chinese are exporting unskilled labor, and some say even prison labor, to work in Africa, should be asked to demonstrate with a concrete example where that is occurring, because I have not come across a single case like that myself. I know Kenya, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Uganda, Southern Africa, and West Africa. I've never come across a case like this. I think what Professor has just said is more accurate, that it's very difficult for African countries to tolerate large-scale immigration of laborers in their country, because the immigration system will not allow that. And in domestic politics, and China knows a lot about this, domestic politics will not allow labor to be imported if it's available locally. I think there's a lot of propaganda around this issue, and let's be clear about that. It is estimated there's 1 million Chinese people living in Africa. A lot of those people are individual businessmen, on people who have brought their own investment and are working and living here. So let's be clear about this, and if somebody is making those allegations, let's challenge them to provide the proof.
In winding up, though, Professor Tang, the Forum for China and African Cooperation is coming up in December. What should China be looking at in terms of Africa? What should Africa be looking at?
I think China then has a put a lot of emphasis on this new FOCAC meeting, so it is already upgraded to the China-Africa Summit. Therefore, I think China actually wants to work with Africa as the continent as a whole, because a lot of African economic problems and also social political problems, they need to be handled by the African countries together. There, for example, the regional integration. Therefore, I think the Chinese government will provide some measures to work with on these networks which can connect the African continent and then facilitate its industrialization and development. While the Africans, I think, as Professor Shega rightly said, a lot of responsibility actually lie in the African countries. So African countries should have their own initiative, should do some preparation and to work out a strategy, work out Africans' own initiative to talk with China, and do not only do not only be passive, but be more positive and active.
Professor Chege, your final comments on this. The Forum for China-Africa Cooperation is coming up. What should Africa be demanding? In your words, Africa needs to demand more.
I think Africa needs to look back. This is going to be a historic period for the FOCAC. Look at what has happened in the previous ones. A lot of them have been very well attended by African heads of state, which means they place a lot of premium on a lot of interest, as Professor Tang has said, in FOCAC and relations between themselves and China. What has happened in the past is that they've tended to have bilateral relations and deals between each country and the People's Republic of China. I think, in my view, it is time that African countries began to realize that the Silk Road across the seas and into Africa will not happen unless our economies are better integrated. So when you're talking about infrastructure, let us, as African countries, consult one another, see what we need to do between ourselves, and let's present this to the People's Republic of China for the next FOCAC.
And we'll leave it there on this discussion. To my guests, Michael Chege in Nairobi. He's an advisor at the Kenyan Ministry of Planning and National Development. And Professor Tang Xiaoyang in Beijing. He's an associate professor at the Department of International Relations at the Tsinghua University. Thank you both for your insights. Below me is the old railway, 100 years old. The new railway will run above me. It will connect the people of the East African region and will make life easier for them. It is also a prime example of China and Africa's cooperation on the continent. Do join me again next week for another edition of Talk Africa. I'm Beatrice Marshall. Goodbye.